Kids Table podcast.
The Kids Table had the enormous privilege of performing our first live show at South by Southwest Edu this year. Our kid and adult players played D&D for an audience of educators, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders in the education space, a game that included a ghost, the word lacrimarum, and 2 natural 20s. You can also watch that game here on our YouTube channel. After the game, Allison, Raenelle, and I had the chance to teach the audience about why D&D is such a good tool for learning empathy, communication skills, confidence, and so much more for kids. On this special episode of Area of Effect, you can listen in on that conversation and the amazing Q&A session that followed.
Welcome to Area of Effect, a podcast by the Kids Table, where we discuss how tabletop RPGs benefit kids and answer your questions about playing TTRPGs with the kids at your own table.
So thank you so much for watching us as we played that game. One more time, we are the Kids Table. My name is Ryan Timty. I am co-founder and creative lead of the Kids Table, which is a company that we founded that has 3 different branches, all of which are focused on helping kids be taken seriously as fully human. I come at it from the entertainment side. I look at the entertainment landscape for kids programming out there, and I see these wonderful social emotional programming shows like Bluey, like Daniel Tiger that we have at the preschool end. And then we've got nothing at the elementary and preteen and stage, so that by the time that kids are teenagers and teenagers, all that they've got out there is terrible stuff on YouTube and streamers, and like there's this gap between the awesome SEL stuff that we have for kids in preschool and nothing after that. So we are hoping that somebody can help us bridge that gap in entertainment programming, and that's what I am hoping to do.
I'm Allison Coons. I'm the other co-founder of the Kids Table and also the business lead. And the part of the Kids Table that I guess is kind of my forte or biggest passion is bringing gaming to families and other like grown-up child relationships, whether it's educators, librarians, auntie, uncle, just a family friend that you call auntie, uncle. I really have a heart for having those experiences together at a table where the kids are on an equal playing field and you're creating a story together and they're taken seriously and given agency in the game. So we have been working to write adventures for younger kids because there's a lot of stuff out there for like teens and up, but there's not so much. There's starting to be more and more, but we're trying to create more accessibility for younger kids.
And hi, my name is Raenelle Taro, and I'm actually one of the players for the Kids Table D&D and real life mom to player Chloe, aka today Elowen. So when it comes to another aspect, I kind of take that education point of view. I really appreciate how the Kids Table and Dungeons and Dragons is a place where multiple learning abilities can be integrated, as well as subjects that can cross so many subjects can happen within a game. And I just think in terms of being a space where learning is happening all the time and kind of in this lifelong and this practical application going from theory to practice as an incredible learning environment. So what is social emotional learning? It's this process through which all people, children, adults of all ages, gain and apply the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude to develop healthy and caring ways of understanding, relating to, and interacting with themselves and with others. And in this way, social emotional learning really is a lifelong journey. In particular, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, the CASEL, has a framework that is a research-based model for implementing SEL through 5 core competencies. And this includes self-awareness, which is understanding what are my own emotions and how do they influence my own behavior. Self-management is regulating those emotions, which includes both how I think about myself, how I think about others, and how I behave with myself and with others. Social awareness, understanding the perspective of others, empathizing and recognizing community and societal norms. Relationship skills, forming those healthy relationships, which includes the ability to communicate clearly, navigate conflict. And something that I don't think we often talk about enough is the ability to ask others for help. Responsible decision-making, making constructive and ethical choices about behavior and social interactions. Now, this model requires meaningful school, family, community partnership to offer learning environments and experiences that support SEL. And I really think in this way, you know, if you are to visit the website, it talks about building just communities where people are thriving. And I think, I'm just as a side note, that has been some of the most exciting things to see over the last 4 years that I've been doing Kids Table D&D, is the way not only I'm thriving, but my child is thriving, and that we're doing it together. So here comes, you know, well, why D&D then? Now you can see here this reminders from your child. And so before I get to that sign, I just want to mention that SEL is something that many caregivers, many educators hope doesn't just happen at school, that it's extended into after school, into the home. And oftentimes that gets put into, my kid does sports, my kid does dance, theater, amazing opportunities for SEL to happen. My own child is doing 2 sports. And I love, love, love the communities that we are becoming connected to. But one thing that I do want to name, both as a parent and an educator, is the fact that more and more societally, we see how competition and product performance-based activities, social emotional learning sometimes becomes deprioritized in those settings. Here's a sign that has to be put up in many baseball fields, and it says, reminders from your child. And this isn't to the kid, this is to the parents and those watching. Reminders from your child, I'm a kid. It's just a game. My coach is a volunteer. The officials are humans. No college scholarships will be handed out today. And I never forget, actually the softball league we're a part of has to include this in every email. And so it's just a reminder to me that while SEL can happen in these spaces, that we see how some of these, like, you need to win environments start to bring SEL, make it more challenging to include that. So that's exactly why I love D&D so much. I did not play before being invited to the kids' table. I was learning with my child. And what I love about it so much as an educator is that it is accessible and inclusive. You know, I didn't have to have I myself as a participant didn't have to have skills to play. It wasn't like I had all this technique and that was the same expectation of Chloe. We just came in not knowing anything. And I think we were playing within minutes, and that is the beauty of that. So it can be applied in school, after school setting, and in the home. It's an easy entry level, like I said, no skills needed. I think one thing to note too is there's no leveling out. It's not like as the child gets older, all of a sudden someone's gonna say, you no longer have the skills needed to play this. It truly can be lifelong. And while connection is important, obviously, when it comes to SEL, in D&D, there is space for the connection simply to be between one player and the game master, or it can be a game that is with many. I also appreciate how D&D does support existing learning structures and can be applied across subject areas. In many ways, D&D takes existing structures like project-based learning, where you're solving a problem, there's sustained inquiry, student voice is emphasized. But again, we note, here's where it parts ways. There's no public product requirement, as in project-based learning, when it comes to D&D. So much of this is the storytelling and the journey, and students, instead of trying to solve a real-world problem, are given they're able to role play, and while they're bringing part of themselves into that, they're also given this possibility of trying something on and exploring.
So now we'll talk about creativity. D&D is an inherently creative activity. As you all saw right from the very start, when you start to create your character, you're asked to be creative. When kid players are creating their character, they're given the freedom to take on the role and be whoever they want to be without the constraints of society that might be related to the limitations of their age, expectations like family and community expectations, or related to their gender. They're allowed to be anything they want to be. And for kids who often do not have a lot of agency in their real life, it's very empowering for them to be given equal responsibility and invited equally to the adults at the table to the creative aspects of the game, like world building, like storytelling, like impacting the world and the characters that are involved in that story setting. As a former educator with middle and high school students, I especially have a passion for how D&D can help tweens and teens especially, but everybody really, to build their identity. During this time of life, developmentally, the primary objective is to discover who am I and where do I belong. So taking on these different personas is a low-risk way for kids to try to explore different facets of their own personality and try to understand and experience other personas as well without the fear of rejection that they might have. For instance, if they came to school every day trying to be a different person, that might be much more scary than if they were taking on a different persona at the table. And then as they're like figuring out who they are and growing comfortable and confident in their own skin, then when they're ready, they can take that into the world with a much stronger foundation. Another thing that happens when, as players, we get to try on different personas is that we have the opportunity to strengthen our compassion muscle because we see things from another worldview, from the experience of people that have had backgrounds that are very different from our own, and putting ourselves in their own shoes helps us to understand that everybody has their own motives and complexities just the same as we do. As we practice telling our own stories, it actually also builds curiosity in learning and believing others' stories that is crucial to building our community in the real world.
So another, familiar term is this idea of circle of inquiry. And so this is a general model where we ask, we investigate, we create, we discuss, and reflect. So in D&D, this looks like after setting this, after the GM sets the scene and prompts them repeatedly through this cycle. So we ask, what do you want to do? What does the group want to do? What is the problem you would like to solve? And then we investigate. What do you notice around you? What would you like to know? How are others feeling? Are others trustworthy? Have you seen this before? And then we create, which is choosing an action that creates new context, new scenes for the story throughout the game. And this might be, as a player's deciding to fight, heal, or build, that they are also considering what new context might be created for themselves and for others. What do others in the group need right now? How might I support them? Is anyone else hurt or in danger? What will happen to others because of my action? If I use this weapon that has a radius that will injure my foe, will it also injure my friend? And so some kids have a strong opinion from the start, while others will need encouragement to try or process out loud. But in the end, choosing that action for yourself allows for creativity and autonomy, but engaging in understanding that what I do still affects others, and that it goes from, I thought about this idea to practice. So it's going from theory to practice. But what happens when that action is over?
Yeah, so the discuss stage comes into play, especially when a plan doesn't go according to plan. When a plan fails, that can be really hard for some kids to take it when, as you saw, we had many bad rolls at the table, right? And it can feel like a personal failure. But the advantage of D&D is that the dice decide if we succeed or fail, so it is not a personal failing, but it encourages us to move on from that failure and move forward alongside our teammates. So the things that kid players are challenged to do is to deal with the consequences of the fallout of that failure. So maybe they failed to persuade an ally to join them in battle. Well, now you're down one person in the battle. Or maybe they, like if we had completely failed to get into the house, we would have had to try to come up with an alternative creative solution. So it's an opportunity to exercise creativity. And then often what happens is the different players at the table, we all have stats that are stronger and weaker than others. So if a player is trying to use a stat that is weaker and they fail, they learn to rely on others who have a strength in that area. And isn't that great for all of the teamwork and group projects, and as adults, like collaborating with our coworkers, to be able to have the skill to recognize your own strengths and others' strengths and to piece them together in a way that makes us stronger together. And then the reflect step comes mostly personally when the player recognizes that failure in the game is not a life or death experience. It helps them to lessen the fear of failure in their own lives, encourages them to be able to take calculated risks and to build resilience and move forward when they experience disappointment and failure in their own life. Now, the last skill that we're going to highlight is empathy and collaboration. In a world where we're more and more connected via social media and the internet, we also see record numbers of feelings of isolation, mental health struggles in kids and teenagers. So one thing that D&D does is it puts kids face to face, interacting, and encourages them to collaborate. As you saw before we start every game with kid players, our GM sets the table rules from the start. And rule number 1, if you remember, was that we treat everybody at the table and in the game with kindness, mercy, and justice. This establishes boundaries for the kids and sets in their mind that the goal is to work together and collaborate, not to compete against one another or put others down to make you look better. They learn collaborative skills like communication when they maybe are a little nervous about speaking up, but it's their turn, and so they have to make a decision and speak up. We saw that back in the beginning, like 4 years ago when we started playing the kids' table, and these kids that were at the table were 6 years old, and so it was a little harder for them to have the courage to speak up. And another great communication skill for kids is learning to listen and wait when it's not your turn, and actively listen to what your other player is wanting to do. Constructive criticism, when you're trying to come up with a plan together and you recognize that something might not work or might have a consequence, learning to give constructive criticism in a manner that's intended to strengthen and not to harm the other person. Making a convincing argument to support your own idea or even persuade an ally in the game. Making compromises with your team to combine your ideas. And collaborating by choosing what is best for the team. For example, using your turn to heal a teammate and not just what you want to do, like making a super cool looking attack for your character. So these collaborative skills is one reason why we see a lot of kids D&D groups being created specifically for neurodivergent kids so that they can practice their social skills together. It's great for all kids, but especially great for neurodivergent kids. Above all, players learn to build empathy, both with other players and the story characters, supported by developmentally appropriate guidance from the GM and other adult players.
So it might seem weird that this sort of a methodology could be applicable in other circumstances. Like we just told a game about a ghost and punching it. So how does that translate into other places? So we just wanted to give you a real quick look at an actual real world scenario that mimics one that my son's 4th grade teacher used in her classroom last year to talk about the gold rush. We live in California. Gold rush is kind of a big deal out there. So she created what was essentially a TTRPG for her 4th grade students that they played out over a series of I think 6 weeks about the gold rush. And basically it went something like this. You got to pick. Which one are you? Are you a gold miner or are you a business owner? So just like I had you choose a character at the beginning, think for a second. Are you a gold miner or are you a business owner? This is, if you've played Oregon Trail, this will feel very familiar to you, right? And then create your character for me. What do you look like? Do you have a family? Where are you traveling to California from? Why did you want to join the gold rush? All of these are things that they would study in the classroom historically along with these choices, right? There were many reasons why some people came to California for the gold rush. What is yours in this game? And then here are your tools. If you are a miner, you have a knife and a cooking pan. If you are a business owner, you have a pickaxe, a lantern, and a rope. So what can you do with those things when we get to the challenges? And she would lay out these challenges that the kids might have when they get to California. And then she would give them a scenario. You've just arrived in California. Oh. But alas, the area you are in apparently has no gold to be found. Many miners are giving up or moving on, so business is also very slow. You hear that a large amount of gold has been found only 2 weeks travel away, but through is very treacherous. What do you do? And then you would have students discuss, what do you do? How do you get through this using the tools that you have, using the character that you have built? Can you make it to the next point of gold? And then they would actually have to roll dice and figure out if they could do that. And they would have to answer questions. And if they answered a question right and another team answered a question wrong, they got to take over their gold claim, which is pretty cool. So that's just one potential way a game like this could translate into the classroom. It's not all punch and ghosts. It's about the structure. It's about the methodology. It's about the sort of ethos of what it is that we're doing up here. When you are thinking through, we're going to break down what we just did real quick and highlight some of the moments that we saw up here on stage that relate to the things that we did. We just talked about. Start thinking about the questions that you have. We'd love to have some people come up to the microphone that's over here on the corner and just dialogue a little bit about what you saw. But one of the things that I saw in the game that I found really funny was when we got to Lacrimarum. And I didn't know how the kids were going to handle that. And I loved the difference between how Beckett took it and how Chloe took it, and how Chloe was funny with it and how Beckett was very serious with it. And I think that sort of highlights the different ways different kids can get into some of these emotional beats. Both are very valid. I wasn't going to dismiss either one, but both had very different sort of jumping off points. And I think that when kids get into this sort of an environment, they bring with them who they are, right? Oakley is not a real person, but Beckett is. Elowen is not a real person, but Chloe is. And so they are bringing a piece of themselves to the table, and I think that sort of informs that choice. What are the things that you guys see that were important?
We only have about 10 minutes left. Do you want
to? Yeah, if there's anybody here who's got any questions, we'd love to see you up there. We'll keep talking until we see people have questions. But if you've got questions, come on up to the microphone. Oh, great. We do have a question. Go for it.
Yeah, so I'm curious how you handle this eternal sort of DM dilemma of how much you telegraph to the players, and especially when they're kids. So, we noticed that for Chloe, you were like, you have turn undead, right? Like you're really trying to hint that, but you weren't like, hey, Beckett, you have pack tactics or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how you balance that and make that call.
Yeah, excellent question. So I would say one thing that playing on stage is a little artificial because we've got a time limit, right? So part of that was helping to remind Chloe what she has. I think that with kids, you have to strike the balance between being too didactic and being too opaque, I think would be a good way to say it, right? A good DM, a good GM knows enough to be able to run the game. But even, you can come up and look at my computer. I've got Google open. I was Googling some of the things that they were asking, which I think is a good thing, right? You don't have to memorize all of the rules in order to run the game. You just need to know just enough to be able to play. Kid players aren't going to know everything. And so the balance, I think, has to be contextual. What are you, as the adult, ultimately hoping happens out of this, right? If you are doing a Gold Rush TTRPG and they don't remember that they have a pickaxe, that's something you got to remind them about, right? And you don't ever want their forgetting to get in the way of a good game or a good story. So professional D&D players, like if anybody watches Critical Role or Dimension 20, those DMs are very strict about how the players have to know their moves. And if the player doesn't know the move, the DM's not going to remind them because it's the player's job. You can't do that with kids. You've got to, I always err on the side of giving a little bit more information, just because the reason a kid doesn't know isn't because they're bad at it. It's just because they can't hold the whole thing in their head. So I think that that's how I would go. I don't know how.
Yeah, I would just say along those lines, just like you would scaffold or scope and sequence any type of subject, it's unpacking D&D in that same way. When the kids or even myself were first learning, I'm thinking back to when our very first campaign, you know, for a 6-year-old, it is not unheard of to just dial it down to, if they're unsure, to say, to give a choice. Well, like the example, we were trying to think about saving something, and Ryan said, do you want to attack or do you want to help the citizens? Mm-hmm. So he didn't exactly decide the action itself, but he was at least guiding, here are the two possibilities.
Yeah.
And then she went from there. So if you think of it as used as prompts, what prompts do I need? What guardrails do I need to keep the story moving forward developmentally? I think that
I agree with that.
Would
help. Funnel it down like that. Yeah, please.
So we are in the early implementation stages for a kindergarten group, and we decided we're doing one-offs, or one-shots, I should say, to facilitate like absences best.
Oh, fantastic.
I'm curious what your recommendations are, and specifically like pitfalls that you see commonly with this age group. So what are some things that we should avoid in the early stages?
For sure. So Beckett and Chloe were kindergarten, were they first grade? Just barely first grade,
barely
maybe?
First
I think
grade.
barely first grade. I would say the common pitfalls are forgetting moves, for sure. So we have up here, and you're welcome to come and look at it afterwards. So the traditional D&D character sheet is like 300 pages long, right? It's like 6 pages. We created a simple sheet that draws all of the most important things from the kid's character sheet and puts it up here. So it's just a couple of things, their best skills, so their proficiencies and their attack, and that's it. So that, I think, is one of the things that is helpful for a young age group, is you doing the work of distilling down their character sheet into the most important things. Another thing that I will say, you can also come and look in my DM screen. I have a DM cheat sheet on the inside of my screen that's got everybody's relevant stats, so that, you know, these players at this point are pretty proficient, so I wasn't having to call out numbers for them. But I routinely on the show will tell them what their proficiency bonus is for certain skills, so that they're not having to fumble around and feel not smart, but so that I am the one holding that information so they can look to me for that information. From behind the DM's chair, at least, I would say those are the two most important things. As parents and players, what do you guys think?
I mean, I would say it's also a combination of what visual cues you're using. Here we had to use all theater of the mind.
Yeah.
But I would say, especially when we first started out, you know, that battle map, and it's not like we had minis when we first started, but even using the little pawns. And so that just gives, you know, the more that you can just provide orientation, even, and that's still a little bit of engagement cue, I think that also helps keep them focused on. I would say, with just working with that age group in general, sometimes, you know, in some games you, I'm sorry, it was funny, I just thought of Texas Hold'em, but it's like whoever has the button is the dealing or whatever. But, you know, is there a cue that you can have so a child knows it's their turn?
Yep. Talking stick.
Yeah, talking stick or whatever it is. Because some of that is the frustration with, like, I want to be heard and so talked over me. And so it's kind of putting a few more boundaries so that some of those interpersonal interactions can happen in a way that feels safe for everyone.
I'll add that I started playing with my daughters, who aren't here today, when they were 4 and 6. And one of the things I did, particularly for my kiddo who has ADHD and couldn't focus very long, was I broke down the sessions with like natural potential endpoints. So every like 15 minutes. And so after 15 minutes, I'd be like, are you done? Do you want to keep going? And then she would choose. She did 45 minutes the first time, which was the longest I'd ever seen her focus on anything. And another thing that we do, which we didn't talk about too much, but we do a lot on the kids' table, is to consider the multiple intelligences, and we make sure to build in a lot of puzzles that suit the kids. So like building challenges, or like literally you need to get up and move around. All right, let's make that a part of the game. How many jumping jacks can you do in 30 seconds? And then we're gonna make that somehow a bonus in the game. So we kind of like built that into the game to help their brains shift, and then they could focus longer.
And the last thing I'd say too is that Rule 3 is really important for that age group. We play it because it's a game. We play the game because it's fun, and when it stops being fun, we stop playing the game. I feel like sometimes kids need permission to be able to do that, especially in a school setting, because disengaging is not an option. Like, school is about how do you engage the kid for as long as possible. So with something like this, having a place or having a signal that they can take a step back when they get overwhelmed, and that it's not like a get out of jail free card, like you've just done something bad and now you can go, but like when you are feeling overwhelmed, when you don't know what's going on, you have permission to take a break. I think that that's an important thing to start instilling, like from that very early age. Congratulations on doing D&D with kindergartners. That's fantastic work, man.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just
no worries.
one last note to that is I would say also the variety of actions that can happen. So I remember distinctly, sometimes a character just wants to hide for their action during a battle.
That has to be valid.
And that's just as valid. And I think that's what we're balancing, is they're beginning to be more aware of what others are doing versus what they want to do, and am I going to be judged? But this is really the space to say, great, where are you going to hide?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Thank you. Please.
Hi. Oh, hello.
Hi.
Hi. Well, I just started a table this year with some middle schoolers. I'm doing 9th graders this year. Last year, I was doing high schoolers.
Okay.
In both situations, same thing happened. So we got like 6 people interested in D&D. And then, of course, they went and told their friends. And then I had 20 people lining up to be a part of a table.
Yep.
And, of course, the biggest constraint a teacher can have is time.
Yep.
What tips can you give me for this? Because it is impossible for me to have 6 different sessions every week with all the children that are interested.
Yeah, and you can't run a table with 20 kids.
Impossible.
Yeah, no. So I got a couple of ideas. You're a resident. Go for it. You go first. You're a resident.
Okay. I
school.
help with a middle school after school group at my daughter's school, and we have probably at least 20, and it like kind of changes who they are every week. So it's different than having like a set group of 5 that you're always doing it with, right? And the thing that the teacher who's the sponsor did that I thought was brilliant was that he took the kids who did have experience with D&D and empowered them to become the DMs and to learn to run their own tables. So he kind of like multiplied himself. So we were able to split into somewhat manageable groups of like 7 or 8, which is still a lot. But yeah, so that helps to break it up. I will say that some classrooms I have seen do with a group that size. I don't like to do it that way, but if you want to see an example of it, there's a gentleman named Lucas Maxwell who's a school librarian in the UK. So if you just look up on social media, Lucas J. Maxwell, and he's written some books about TTRPGs for neurodivergent kids, and he's done super cool stuff. But look him up and try to like, even like if you messaged him, he would totally message you back and give you some ideas for like how to run groups for that size.
Thomas J. Maxwell, you said.
Lucas J. Maxwell.
Lucas J. Maxwell. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Just piggybacking off of that, one of the things that I've been toying around with too is how can you have one adult with like say 20 kids? It's almost like the adult is the one at the front of the room doing the very beginning of the story. This is the bigger problem for today, and now you guys have to go off into groups of 6. I anoint you to be the DMs. and you guys come up with part of a solution to this problem, and then we come back together. One from each group gets to do one last thing with me, the adult, as the DM, while everybody else sort of watches in participation. That's something I'm trying to figure out for the after-school program.
Yeah, I've seen some groups will put a group of like 2 or 3 or 4, and they're playing the character together, like Jaeger style, the character, and that's another way to get them to really collaborate to make the decision together of what their character is going to do.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Thank you. So cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, it is 4:30, so we're going to respect Antone's time, and we are going to go ahead and say thank you so much for being a part of this session. I'm going to put this last slide up. If you scan this QR code, this will take you to our website. If you click on the Learn page on our website, this takes us to the link tree. This takes us to the link tree, which is even better. One of the things you should know is that we are not the only people talking about this. There is a community of people out there that are creating great resources, both curriculum and academically, to figure out how to get kids doing TTRPGs and D&D in the classroom, at home, after school, because of all of these benefits that we just talked about and that you saw up here. Our kids have grown so much playing this game, and we would love to see other kids do this too. So please ask us more questions afterwards. You can find all of our contact information on the link tree and at our website. And thank you so much for being a part of the Kids Table today. I hope you enjoyed it. See you next time, friends.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Area of Effect. Check out our original actual play D&D show with kids at the table on YouTube or your favorite podcast app. Be a part of the ongoing conversation by emailing questions at thekidstablednd.com. Find resources to bring adventure to your own table at thekidstablednd.com/shop, and join our quest to introduce more kids to D&D at patreon.com/thekidstablednd. Because when kids are at the table, everyone wins.